Expectations for the Detroit Red Wings heading into this season are the highest that they have ever been throughout this 8-year playoff drought. This is the year that a lot of people are expecting Detroit will get over the hump, take that next step in the rebuild, and finally get back to the postseason. However, as you may have been able to tell by the title of this video, I'm not so convinced that this is going to be the year that happens. I have my concerns, I have my doubts, but at the same time, I am also cautiously optimistic. You never want to write off your favorite team heading into a brand new season because it's a brand new season. It's a level playing field. Anything can happen. I always like to make at least one of these videos heading into a new NHL season and kind of just go over where I'm at when it comes to the Red Wings, what my expectations are, and all that kind of stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing today. But before we do talk about this upcoming season, I do quickly want to recap last season because that's where a lot of the excitement comes from for Red Wings fans and why people's expectations are so high for them heading into this season. Last year was the Red Wings' most successful season throughout this 8-year rebuild. They finished with 91 points, just barely missing out on that last wildcard spot. It came down to their very last game of the season, and we all know how that ended. In a span of just about 10 minutes, Red Wings fans went from being on cloud 9, seeing David Perron score what may have been one of the most memorable goals in recent memory for the Red Wings, to just a few minutes later having that goal not matter because the Washington Capitals put the Red Wings season to bed, scoring an empty netter in a tie game. Obviously, Philadelphia at the time thought that they could still keep their season alive. They had to win in regulation. They didn't know at the time that their season was over because Detroit went to overtime. Just an absolutely heartbreaking way to end what was otherwise a very fun season for Red Wings fans. And based off of the fact that the Red Wings have been a rebuilding team for so long and they're expected to just continue to get better year after year, natural progression would say that they just missed out on the playoffs by 1 point. In all likelihood, they'll make it this year. I don't necessarily like to get behind that logic because I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities at all that the Red Wings finish with less points this season than they did last season. And I'll kind of explain why I feel that way right now. Let's take a look at some of the Red Wings numbers from this past season. They were 9th in the NHL in goals for per game at 3.35, 24th in goals against per game. Defensively, they weren't great this past season. The goaltending was inconsistent all throughout the year. The special teams as a whole were good, especially the power play, 9th ranked power play in the entire league. But then when you go and look at the shots for per game, shots against per game, expected goals for per 60, and expected goals against per 60, it's not great. It's all down there in the basement of the league. So what that tells me is the Red Wings' high-flying offense from this past season is probably not sustainable, at least to the level it was at last season, being 9th in the NHL in goals for per game, but just 30th in the NHL in expected goals for per 60. That means the Red Wings were finishing their high-quality scoring chances extremely efficiently, and that's what they did pretty much all season long. They finished last season with the 3rd highest shooting percentage by a team in the entire league, only behind Tampa Bay and Vancouver. And when you look at the Red Wings roster on paper heading into this season, it's not bad by any means, but I also don't think it's a roster that screams we're going to be one of the most lethal finishing teams in the NHL again, like we were last season. I feel like last year was kind of an outlier, and I'm expecting some regression there. And again, even though last season the Red Wings were a top 10 offense in the league based off of finishing, it still wasn't enough to get them into the postseason. Down the stretch, they were largely let down by their defense and goaltending. The defense especially, I think, needed a massive overhaul this summer, and Yzerman didn't really go out and do that. When you look at the players the Red Wings brought in this offseason and who left, it's not a massive change. They brought in guys like Vladimir Tarasenko, Eric Gustafsson, Cam Talbot, and some depth with Tyler Mott, but they lost a key piece in Shane Gostisbehere, who was a big factor in the Red Wings having a top 10 ranked power play. David Perron also left. He signed with Ottawa. They dealt Robbie Fabry to Anaheim in a cap dump. They also dealt Jake Wallman to San Jose in a cap dump. I'm not going to beat a dead horse there. Everyone knows how I feel about that trade. As a whole, when you look at everyone the Red Wings brought in and everybody that left, I think it's hard to make an argument that they really got much better or much worse. I think Detroit is really relying on internal growth of young players to take that next jump this season, which honestly I'm all for. You don't want to just give opportunities to rookies and young players. You want them to have to earn it, but I do feel like it's time that the Red Wings let their young players play, aside from just Raymond and Seider. Especially with how abysmal the blue line was at times last season, I want guys like Simon Edmondson and Albert Johansson to get consistent top 6 NHL minutes. That being said though, when you're relying a lot on the success of rookies to take take your team to the next level, there's no guarantee it's going to pay off. So that's why I am kind of urging a lot of Red Wings fans not to, be a downer about the team heading into the season, but just kind of keep your expectations in check. With that all being said, though, let's go ahead and take a look at the Red Wings depth chart heading into next season, starting off with the forwards. These aren't necessarily my predictions for the lines. Again, it's just a depth chart. On the left side, you have Alex DeBrincat, Vladimir Tarasenko, Michael Rasmussen, and Tyler Mott. Down the middle, Dylan Larkin, JT Compher, Andrew Kopp, Joe Veleno, and on the right, Lucas Raymond, Patrick Kane, Christian Fischer, and Jonathan Berggren. If this is what the forward group ends up looking like on opening night, I don't think it's bad by any means. I think it's pretty deep. That third line of Rasmussen, Kopp, and Fischer, which was together a lot down the stretch last season, played really well. So I think there's a good chance the Red Wings start the season with that as their third line. I'm not going to say that a top line of DeBrincat, Larkin, and Raymond is one of the best top lines in the league, but I think it is at the very least a solid first line, especially if Lucas Raymond is going to take another step and continue to build off his last couple of months of last season where he was one of the better players in the entire league. To me, the biggest issue looking at this forward group is the lack of a true number 2 center. I like JT Compher's game. I think he was fine last season. I think he did an okay job, but when you compare him to second line centers around the NHL, I would say Compher's average at best. I always just find myself wondering what this team could look like if you have a number 2 center that's closer to the level of a Dylan Larkin. Obviously not as good as Larkin, but closer to that level. And then all of a sudden you have, Larkin, a very good number 2C, and then Compher as your 3C. All of a sudden you look extremely deep down the middle. Now down at the bottom there, I do have some notable rookies that I'm not counting out of making the opening night roster. Nate Danielson, Marco Kasper, and Carter Mazur. Obviously the Red Wings are hoping one day Danielson or Kasper or both can eventually be that true number 2 center the Red Wings have been looking for. And I've actually really liked what I've seen from Marco Kasper in the preseason so far. Obviously, you have to take it with a grain of salt because it is just preseason and it's a small sample size, but I think he has been very impressive. And if he's able to keep up this play for the next week or so, I would honestly be surprised if he at least doesn't get, a 9-game look to start the regular season. I would actually like to see at least 2 of the 3 rookies I have listed there at the bottom make the opening night roster and at least get a short look. I think the most likely 2 out of those 3 are Kasper and Mazur. I would say Danielson is probably still maybe a year or 2 away from being a full-time NHLer, but Kasper and Mazur to me have both been standouts in the preseason so far. Kasper especially. Last night, the Red Wings played Kasper and Mazur with pretty much the entire NHL roster against the Penguins on home ice, and the Penguins had pretty much just their AHL team out there, and the Red Wings got waxed. 5-1 was the final score. It was a bad look, but even in that game, which was a very tough watch, Mazur and Kasper were standouts and were 2 of the Red Wings' better players with the NHL group, so I think that bodes well for them. That's enough talking about the forward group, though, because I don't really think that's where the problems lie when it comes to this Red Wings team. I now want to shift focus and look at the defense depth chart. On the left side, you have Ben Sherratt, Simon Edvinsson, and Eric Gustafsson, who the Red Wings brought in free agency, and on the right side, Moritz Seider, Jeff Petrie, and Justin Hall. And then down at the bottom there, you also have guys like Olli Maatta, William Lagesson, and Albert Johansson, all who I expect to get into a fair share of games this season. I'm going to be blunt. Looking at this D-core on paper, it is a bottom 10 D-core in the league, in my opinion. The only way I see this D-core being even close to above average is if Seider plays like a Norris candidate, Ben Sherratt and Jeff Petrie age in reverse, and Simon Edvinsson in his first full season is a legit beast of a 2-way top 4 defenseman, and I think you're asking for a lot there. Now, sometimes a mediocre or even a bad D-core can look okay if you get exceptional goaltending, but looking at the Red Wings goaltending situation heading into this season, I'm not convinced that's going to happen either. They brought in Cam Talbot on a 2-year deal worth $2.5 million a season in free agency. I am fully expecting him to be the opening night starter, and don't get me wrong, Cam Talbot was very solid for the LA Kings this past season, but he's 37 years old. And the year prior to the season he just had with the LA Kings, as a member of the Senators, he finished with an .898 save percentage in 36 games. I don't think there's any guarantee the Red Wings are going to get the same version of Talbot that the Kings got last season. When it comes to Ville Husso, you're always concerned about his health, and even when he's been healthy as a member of the Red Wings so far, his game has been very streaky. Alex Lyon had a fantastic stretch this past season, but really just fizzled out down the stretch because it looked like he just got overplayed and overworked. Hopefully one of those guys, or maybe it's a group effort, but somebody needs to step up and take the reins and give the Red Wings consistently above average NHL goaltending throughout the season, because if they're going to make the playoffs, I think they're going to need that. Not listed on the depth chart here, the Red Wings do also have two really solid goaltending prospects in Sebastian Cossa and Trey Augustine, but I think both of those guys are at least 2 years away from getting a consistent look in the NHL. In my opinion, a lot has to go right for the Red Wings to not just replicate what they did last season, but especially to take that next step and get back into the playoffs. So that's where I'm at when it comes to my expectations for the Red Wings heading into the 2024-25 NHL season. I'm not sitting here and saying I don't think this team has a bright future, because that's not the case. I just feel like this might not be the year where they really take off like everyone's expecting them to. I think we could still maybe be a year or two away from that, when guys like Mazur, Kasper, Danielson, Axel Sandin Pellikka, and all those guys are full-time members of the team. And in this video, we only talked about the Red Wings. I didn't even touch on any of the other teams in the Atlantic Division, which obviously play a factor in the Red Wings' chances of making the playoffs or not. The Atlantic is a solid division top to bottom. I don't think there's a bad team in that division. Montreal got a lot better, although they've had some very unfortunate injury luck throughout the preseason. I'm still expecting them to be a better team than they were last year, even with the injuries. So that is going to do it for today's video, kind of previewing the Red Wings heading into the season and giving you guys my expectations and why I'm not so sold that this is going to be the year they get back into the playoffs. As always, I want to know what you guys are thinking, especially if you're a fellow Red Wings fan like myself. Sound off down below in the comments. Let me know your expectations for the team, any predictions you may have for the team or a player on the team, anything at all. Let me know how you're feeling down below in the comments. If you made it all this way to the end of the video and you ended up enjoying yourself, please remember to leave a like. That is the best way to let me know that you enjoyed, and it does actually help out the videos a ton. And most importantly, if this was your first time checking out the channel and you want more NHL content just like this all year round, be sure to hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you all again soon.